Welcome back. Let's welcome in my panel of Liberal MP from Victoria, Keith Wallahan, and from CPAC Australia, Kayla Hanna. Welcome to you both. Now, in Aston, Labor have bucked a century-long trend and won a seat off the opposition in a by-election. Keith, how much trouble is the party really in?
I think there's no sugarcoating it. It's not good at all. So when you look at this city of 5 million people and you look at the metropolitan seats, and there's 21 of them, there's now 2. And I have 1 here in Menzies on a margin of 0.7, and Michael Stoker in the seat of Deakin has 1 on 0.2. So the party does not have the representation in metropolitan Melbourne anywhere near like it ever did. It's at its lowest ebb.
And what's the way forward, Keith?
Well, the first thing is to acknowledge that we have a problem and we have to fix it. And I think the first thing is to have cool heads and to not throw everything out that has worked for us in the past, to recognise that we are a party, a Liberal party, that has values that speak to all of Australia, not just rural and regional Australia, but metropolitan Australia. And we need to remind ourselves of that and the values of aspiration, freedom and opportunity. But I think we need to work harder at communicating those values to people in the cities.
Yeah, the goodness of those values is pretty timeless. Kayla, what do you put the loss down to?
Well, I think that it's a divided party. You know, there's a little bit of an internal war going on at the moment, and it shows at the polling booths, you know. Look, at least when you vote Labor, you know what you're getting, you know. The party's divided and it shows. It's 4 elections now, you know. Begs the question, how many more are we going to have?
Yeah, how long till we learn the lessons, right? This week saw, changing tack slightly, the Greens and Labor finally come to an agreement on a climate deal. Although there's a bit of debate still between Bant and Albanese as to what the agreement actually means. Here's Prime Minister Albanese.
You will note, hopefully pretty obviously, that the demands that were placed on us of ruling out future projects are ones that we said we wouldn't agree with, and we haven't.
Now that's pretty different to what Adam Bant said.
This means a huge number of those 116 coal and gas projects in the pipeline will not be able to go ahead.
Kayla, is our energy future safe and secure?
Well, I don't think it's safe and secure unless we're willing to look at all the options, you know. Labor and the Greens, they're so quick to demonise coal and gas when there's so little alternative out there. You know, we know renewables, they're not reliable, they're intermittent, they're very expensive. But look, Amanda, I'm a big advocate of letting the market decide, you know, lift the ban on nuclear and let the market have a say.
And maybe pull up stumps on some of the very generous subsidies that certain political donors do rather well out of. Keith, who ended up winning in this deal between Labor and the Greens?
I know who doesn't win, and it's the environment. And I think we should always start from the proposition that my party, the Coalition, we also care about the environment and want a better future for our children and grandchildren. But this doesn't achieve that. All we'll see is industries moved from this country overseas, where there will be more emissions and then imported back. So there'll be no change to emissions, but a change to our energy security, and that will be reflected in power prices and our economy.
Yeah, you're spot on there. There's been more mixed messaging this week over what powers the Indigenous voice to Parliament will have. After Prime Minister Albanese constantly assured us there would be no High Court challenges, no lawyers' picnic, here was Attorney General Mark Dreyfus.
Will it be able to go to the High Court, point to the words in the Constitution that say they may make representations to executive government and make a case that they have not been heard?
That's a possibility.
Keith, all eyes are on what policy the Liberal Party will take on the voice. What position do you believe the party should take?
I think the position that Peter has taken for the last 10 months has been the right one, asking about detail And when we've asked questions about detail, those answers haven't been forthcoming. Tomorrow there will be the first meeting of the Joint Select Committee looking into the proposal, and I am a member of that committee. And there are serious questions to be asked about the particular wording, especially the voice to the executive. There are real concerns about what that will mean for the functioning of our democracy. And those questions should be asked because we didn't have a constitutional convention. We should have had one. So in effect, this committee will be substituting that. And I will be a constructive voice for making sure that the questions are asked and they deserve to be answered.
Yeah, that's a good attitude to take into it. Kayla, if the government can't agree on what powers the voice will have, how can we, as members of the Australian citizenry, be expected to vote for it?
Well, that's a great question, Amanda. How can we be expected to bring in something that we know so little about? In fact, I think Mr Albanese is counting on the fact that we know so little about it in order to usher this in completely unscrutinised. You know, it's not good.
Yeah, I really think he is preying on the goodwill of Australians for our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander citizens. Turning to the US, Donald Trump is expected to surrender himself in New York this week so that he can face charges for paying hush money to a porn star. Kayla, how much damage will this do to his re-election chances? Or do you think it might actually help increase his support?
Well, there was actually, Amanda, there was a recent Fox poll that said that it wasn't going to affect him at all. You know, Americans, look, they're not silly. They've done this before. If recent history gives any indication, we saw it with the Russian hoax, the impeachment, the January 6th, you know, they're out for blood. They're out to get him, especially on the eve of an election campaign. But look, to answer your question properly, it's hard to know unless we have those sealed documents from the grand jury.
Yeah, fair point. Keith, the Democrats are really beside themselves with joy at this. The absurdity of their delight is really quite strange to watch. But will it ultimately backfire on them?
I think there's a warning in all of this for our democracy that we've generally avoided the use of the courts as a political weapon. And I don't think it's a good feature of US democracy. It should always be up to the people to decide. I don't want to pass judgment on the particular charges that are facing former President Trump. That process deserves to play out. But if there is politics behind it, I think that would be concerning. But we'll find out in due course whether that's true or not.
Yeah, I think you're right to approach the use of criminal charges, particularly about things that precede a person's time as president, as leverage or as a weapon in political contests rather than using the courts in the routine, usual way that suggests people are equal before the law. Finally, Barack Obama's speaking tour in Australia saw him compliment Chinese President Xi Jinping for what he called his forceful and confident demeanour against Trump, and blamed Trump for the strained relationship between China and the West. Very briefly, Keith, what was your reaction to these comments?
It's very similar to how this issue is playing out politically here. There was a breakdown in the relationship, but it wasn't the fault of the US, wasn't the fault of Australia. It was the fault of the CCP, and of course our businesses want to trade again, but I think this revisionist view of who was to blame is a feature of our democracy and the United States, it seems.
Just more of those domestic political contests playing out. Thank you very much, Kayla Hanna and Keith Wolahan, for your time and your insights. Now.